call this quilt Scrap Garden, and it's made completely with scraps, the top is. And it's an optical illusion quilt. It looks like you can see circles here, but there are no curved seams in here at all. And how you achieve the optical illusion is through the use of light and dark fabrics. There's not too many medium fabrics in here, so the contrast of the light and the dark gives you the optical illusion, the illusion of circles. The blocks finish, there are 2 different blocks, and they finish at 9 inches. They're set 7 across and 9 down, and the quilt finishes at 63 inches by 81 inches. So I'm going to show you how to cut and piece the blocks, either the rotary cutting method or the AccuQuilt method. I cut all these pieces with the AccuQuilt, but they can also be rotary cut as well. We'll go through that, and then at the end I'll show you some up-close pictures of this quilt. The 2 blocks used in this quilt is this block called 54, 40, or Fight, and the churn dash block, and they both finish at 9 inches. Now the reason you might ask, why do they call this 54, 40, or Fight? It seems that in 1844, the presidential election, James Polk was running, and he won. And there were negotiations going on between the British and the United States that they were going to split up Oregon. Well, a lot of people in the United States thought that Oregon should belong totally to the United States. And this campaign slogan, 54, 40, or Fight, the 5440 was the latitude line, 54 degrees, 40 minutes of the northern boundary of Oregon. So that's how, I don't know why this block is called that, but that's how 54, 40, or Fight came into being. It was a campaign slogan back in 1844. There's a total of 63 blocks in this quilt. The 54, from now on I'll call this the 54 block just to make it easier. The 54 block, there are 32 in the quilt. And the churn dash block, there are 31 in the quilt. So we're going to give the numbers of patches that we're going to need to stitch these blocks together. So in the 54 block, you have 4 patches times 32 blocks. You'll need 128 of these units, the 4 patch units. Now the 4 patches, you can cut 2-inch squares, you can cut 2-inch strips, sew them together into sets and cut them into 4 patches and sew them together. I use the AccuQuilt, and if you use the AccuQuilt, if you have the 6-inch mix and match set and the 6-inch companion Angles set, you have all the dies you need to cut this out. So for some of the 4 patches, I used this one, and it's die number 2 in the mix and match set, and it cuts 4 squares, 4 2-inch squares at once. You could cut these lights and darks, you can chain piece them and make your 4 patches. Another way I made the 4 patches, there were some I had in my scrap bin that were light and dark, and if they were too big, I'd simply cut them down to 3.5 inches and use those. So you'll need 428 4-patch units. The next one is this light colored square. For the 54 block, you need 1, and then you have 4 in the churn dash block. So you'll need a total for the light squares, you'll need 32 for the 54 block, and you'll need 124 for the churn dash block. I know it sounds like a lot, but they're just squares. They're 3.5-inch squares, so it's not too bad. Now, the half square triangle, and you'll need 124 of those, and those are just for the churn dash block. Now, the last block is the tri-rec block, and that's this block right here. Sometimes this is called triangle and a square, and a lot of people call it the tri-rec. I think because this is a triangle and these are rectangles cut on the diagonal. So to cut these, if you have your 6-inch companion angles, you can use die number 13 and die number 14. This is die 13, and it makes the triangle. So you would put your dark fabrics on here because all of the triangles here are going to be dark. And it makes your rectangles. And the rectangles are the only units in this whole quilt where it matters how you put the fabric on. So if I put the fabric on this way, it's going to cut me a left and a right side. If I put the fabric on, say, fold it up and put it on like this, then I'll have 4 pieces. There'll be 2 for the left and 2 for the right. So it doesn't really matter which way you cut these as long as you have enough left side and enough right side pieces. So if you don't have the AccuQuilt, I suggest using one of these tri-rec rulers or set of rulers. This one cuts the triangle, and for this size you'll cut 3.5 inch strips, or if you have a 3.5 inch scrap like this, you simply lay this, and the triangles here are all dark, so you lay this, the 3.5 inch mark here, and you line up the top and you cut it. So there's one of your triangles. Then how do you use the rec tool? You'll take 2 pieces of fabric and 3 inches high, and these are going to be right sides together. They could be wrong sides together, but this way it matters because you're only cutting one side at a time. So you lay the edge here, and you lay your 3.5 inch here, and then cut it. See, I messed that up. This has a little piece you're going to cut up off here. It's very tiny. So you can see how tiny that is right there. But it means a lot. It really helps to cut that off when you're trying to piece these together. So these were stacked right sides together when we cut them. Now we have a left side and a right side, and both the right side is facing up, or the right side of the fabric is facing up. This is the left side of the triangle, the block, and the right side of the block. Now when you piece these together, it's going to go together like this. So the little notch you just cut out, we're going to turn this around, and let's zoom in on it, just like that. So here's that little piece you cut off, and this point right here is going to go along this edge, and then the edge that you're going to stitch is aligned on this edge of the triangle. So when you stitch this 1/4 inch, it opens up perfectly. So you'll need to follow the instructions on your tri-rec tool, and basically that's how you stitch these together. The part to be concerned with is the accurate cutting. As long as you cut it accurately, it'll work out fine. Now I'm going to sew these blocks together and then tell you some little tips I came up with along the way. I just realized that I've been calling this the churn dash block, but it's actually the Shoo Fly block. So I'll have to go back and correct that. So this is the Shoo Fly block, and this is the 5440 or fight block. Now I pieced them together. So I wanted to give you a few tips I learned along the way that might make things a little bit easier for you and less confusing. I will have a list of all the pieces you need to cut in the video description. So I'll have 3.5 inch light block, and you need 24. I'll just say you need 24. You don't really, you need more than that. And then if you have 3.5 inch dark block, so you write these across your paper, and you can just use a scrap piece of paper. And say you need 24 of these and you need 100 of these. So as you're cutting, and you've cut 3 or 4 of these light blocks, you subtract them from here. So 24 minus 4, that leaves 20. You always have a running total of what you need to cut, and you don't have to go through and keep counting stacks of pieces of fabric all day long, because you will do that. So when you get down to where it's 0, then you know you're done cutting. And as you're cutting, have these little bags. I've used this bag, a bunch of times. Have these little bags where you can put your light squares in one bag, your dark squares in another bag, your half square triangles in another. It just keeps it keeps it in order as you're going. Once everything is cut, I went ahead first and I made all of my half square triangles. I just pieced lights to darks, mixed them all up, pieced them all. So once those were done, this Shoo Fly block, you already have your squares cut and you can piece all of your Shoo Fly blocks. So that's kind of instant gratification. You've got your half square triangles pieced, so go ahead and piece your Shoo Fly block and set those to the side. And then next, I did all of the 4 patches. I went ahead and just pieced all the 4 patches that I needed. And finally, I pieced all of the tri-rec squares. And then once those were all done, I could piece the 54, 40, or fight block. When you set these, you want the 54 block to be in all the corners. So if you're laying out your blocks and you're going 7 across, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you have 9 down, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You'll want to have your 54 block here, and here, and here, and then here. You want these to be in the outside corners, so start with your 54 block, your Shoo Fly, 54 Shoo Fly, like that, and then this will be Shoo Fly. You alternate the blocks because this looks better in the corner than this. In the video description, there's a link to my blog post where I talk about when I pieced this and how I pieced it. Just a little bit more information, and there's some other links there too that might help you. So now let's look at some close-up pictures of the Scrap Garden quilt.